you worked for President Kennedy.
Yes.
And he was, of course, killed in November of 1963. And countless books have been written blaming Cuban exiles, people who participated in the Bay of Pigs, for being involved in some way with the CIA in that assassination. What's your assessment of that claim?
Well, I'll tell you, most of the brigade member believes President Kennedy was a traitor. He was the one who definitely he had the responsibility, and he was responsible for our failure. Looking from another point, I believe that he was a young president, ill-advised, and we paid the price. And I believe that actually he was killed because he tried to amend that. After he was able to pull the brigade out of prison, he opened the Armed Forces of the United States for the brigade members. I became a second lieutenant in the U.S. Army in 1963. And then he promised us a special operation, which was started in Central America in 3 different bases, and not many people know about it. But then he was assassinated. And a lot of people believe that it was only one shooter. I believe there were 2 shooters. We have information that there was a Cuban, which is now a retired general, Fabian Escalante, who was a captain at the time, who was in Dallas. And he was the second shooter in the assassination of the president.
Well, okay, I'm sorry, will you say that one more time? What's his name?
Fabian Escalante.
Fabian Escalante.
And he was in Dallas that day, and then he left. It was something that, and Castro said that he knew that Cuba, the United States was trying to kill him, but be very careful because the Cuban also had a very long hand. So it was a matter either Kennedy or Castro. I think that's how he got killed.
So you believe that Kennedy was assassinated by Cuban forces, Castro?
To a great extent, yes. Remember that Oswald was in the Cuban embassy for several hours before he went to Dallas that day. And we also have the fact that, with no question about it, that Fabian Escalante was there. And then Cuba denied at the beginning that he was ever in the Cuban embassy. Later on, when they learned that we, as CIA, we had pictures and movie of him getting into our embassy, then they said that they went to a very distinct check, and they found out that indeed, yes, Oswald was in the Cuban embassy, and they claimed that he came in there to get a Cuban visa, and he was denied. But I do believe that it was a participation of Cuba in the assassination of the president. And later on, one assistant of President Johnson said that they knew about it, but for security consideration, they denied to the public the participation of Cuba in the assassination of the president. Because remember, at that time, there were already 4 offensive missiles inside Cuba. When the October crisis took place, they already had been able to bring into Cuba 4 offensive nuclear missiles. That's why when Khrushchev thought, and he knew that the U.S. knew that they had 4 offensive missiles inside the island, he could bring 20 of them. That's when the October crisis took place. But there were still 4 missiles inside Cuba that were offensive. So at the time, everybody said, well, they cannot attack Cuba because the Kennedy-Khrushchev treaty, it was never implemented. Because the important part of that treaty was that there would be a personal ocular inspection by American personnel in Cuba to make sure that they had taken out those 4 missiles. And Cuba never allowed them to be able to come in to check for that. So that compromise was never, the Kennedy-Khrushchev was never implemented at all.
Do you believe the CIA had any role in Kennedy's assassination?
No, I don't think so. I don't believe so. I know there's a lot of allegations to that effect, but I don't think so. I don't believe so at all. I am convinced.
Did you ever come across Howard Hunt during your...
Yes, I met him after he came out of prison. Actually, he was coming for Christmas out of prison. And I have met his daughter, which our team is home, Kevin. And we run to each other into Sears. So I invited him to come to my home.
You ran into him in Sears?
Yeah, in Miami. And I invited him to come to my home. While I am sitting there, I get a call from the chief of station from Miami and say, Felix, by the way, Howard Hunt will be in town. Make sure that you don't meet him. And the guy was sitting right in front of me. I already had given him my card to use for the 3 days he was in Miami. So later on, I called my boss and said, you should have called me sooner. I said, what? He said, well, I had Howard Hunt in front of my house. No, I said, yes. You didn't tell me. And I brought him to Sierra. I brought him to my home. It's the first time I ever met him.
Amazing. Why did the CIA not want you to see Howard Hunt?
Because they don't want to see, they believe there is a connection between the CIA and them. Even though Howard Hunt was working for the CIA, but he was head of the task force for the White House with Nixon.
Yes.
So there was a connection there.
Yes, there was. Interesting. How did you get involved in the Iran-Contra story?
Well,